In this recording, we're going to learn to use Python. We'll use Piezo as our IDE. IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment, and we'll see why. So Python is a programming language. To easily program, Piezo gives us three panels. One is our editor panel, one is our shell panel, and the other, you can always add new shells, the other is our file structure panel, where we define where we're working. I've defined Python scripts as a folder where I'm going to try to keep all my work today. In the shell, we can type a command like cd to see exactly where we are, and we can change our location that way, and then double check that we went to the right place. I want to be in Python scripts for everything I do today. In the shell, we can also type commands such as print. In Python, we enclose things in parentheses and quotations that will print the text that appears between the quotation. You can enter your commands from the shell, or you can enter them to build code into the editor. So here I'll replicate what I did in the shell. Print, open parentheses, quote, hello world, close quote, close parentheses. Let's enter another statement, print. Oh yes, and we can see that print doesn't care whether you're using double or single quotes. Let's check that out. So we have two print statements, both of which use different, each of which use different kind of quotes, and we can run that by going to the run menu, run a script. Oops, we have to save our file before we can run that document, run that program. So let's go to save. We'll save it as something, I'll call it first program. Notice that mine is saving to my Python scripts folder. Now I can run it again. And the program output appears in the shell. There we see both of my print statements, the output for both of my print statements. We can also run individual bits of the code by selecting it and clicking run. So that can be very useful if we're going to debug. So you go to run and choose execute selection, and it'll only run the piece that you told it to run. Now let's create a second program. So we go to File, New, and here we're going to create some variables. We'll take input from the shell, the user, and we'll act on those variables. So we'll just call our variable variable. There's some forbidden terms, but for the most part you can give your variable any name you like. And in this case, the variable is going to call on input, which is a built-in function. We'll say in quotations, enter a string of text and close quotes. And now if we run that, it's going to take whatever's entered by the user and store that as the variable. And then we can tell it to print out whatever the user input, whatever the contents of the variable are. And I'll put that in quotes to start with, just to show you the difference between using the quotes and not. The quotes are telling it to print whatever string is between the quotes. So let's run it. Oops, didn't save it. There's our first program. Let's call this one second program. So we can see back in the shell that it asks us for our text. We'll drop our cursor there. We'll input some random text. It prints the word variable because it was inside the quotations. And it also prints whatever the user entered at the cursor. That is the contents of the actual variable. Okay, now we can use a built-in function called len, L-E-N. I want you to go practice using the help function at the shell, but I'm not going to show you that here. Let's go to the shell and type len variable. Oh, didn't like that. Len the built-in function len requires the parentheses, and you see that it accesses the variable that we defined in our program, and we can run that program as well and see what happens back in the shell. So we'll enter some new text. We enter it. Oops, it didn't like the way it printed our variable, but it didn't like the way we used the term len. So let's play around with that a little more. So you can see that in the command line, len variable seems okay, but len is not acting. So we're kind of debugging right now, right? And learning how to use things as we go. Len's not acting on, or it's not printing out what we told it to do. We don't get an error. Len seems to be working properly. Oh, what if we put quotes around variable? Maybe that'll work. We'll enter some more text. Random text. Nope, didn't do anything. Still, so len is doing something, but it's not giving us the output. So we'll call back our built-in function, our print statement. And now print is going to access the variable and we'll get the length then. So we'll get it. Let's enter some more text. Here's some more text. Blah, blah, blah. Random text. And we get 26 for the length of our random text. Right? So now it printed out that length, but it wanted to, the built-in function len was waiting for us to tell it what to do. And we can play around adding some more commands to our print statement. So if we give it some quotes, then that's going to be a string that it prints. So we'll say length equals, separated by a comma from the len statement, the len command. And now it tells us that our length of the text entered was 15. We can also go back and print sections of the variable. In this case, the bracket 0 tells us where in the string of text we are, and it'll print that. So let's try it at the command line here. Print, open parentheses, there's our variable name, variable, and open a bracket and type 0. And that's going to give us the very first place in our text string. So L was the first character that we entered at the command line, but we can change that to a range with a colon. So open bracket 0 to 5, close bracket, close parentheses, gives us the first 5 characters. -5 tells us what's at the -5 from the end of the string. So I'm just giving you a chance to play around here now with how you access different pieces of the variables. Let's make a for loop. So if we type for I in a range, so now the for is actually calling on a built-in function. For I is in some range of our variable, -5. Always close your for loops with a colon. So at that iteration, at the beginning of our for loop, we'll print the variable over 3 characters. Let's just run that and see what happens. First of all, we're calling on something called range, right? So we've got a couple of new functions there. Range calls for the length of the variable, -5. Oops, forgot my close parentheses. So enters our string of text as per usual. Blake Gillespie is my name. And now what we see is that it's generated the length, yes, 22 characters in variable. And then it's taken and placed in, yes, right, there's the length, 22. And it's taken 3 characters at a time, each iteration, up until we got to 5 characters past from the end of the text string and then stopped. So I iterates over len. Our loop iterates over the len function length, right? And then so counting along as we go, and then for each iteration, it prints those 3 characters that happen to be at that position. Then it goes to the next character. So we've covered so far creation of variables. That's great. We found out about some special functions like len and also range. And we tried to build those into for loops. So give it a go, play around. But always save your work when you're done. Okay, in our third program, we're going to open a text file, iteratively, there's a loop again, act on the text, and then we'll store the output. Open data, act on it, store it. So let's create a new program, and we'll immediately save it so that we can start running it right away, and we'll call it third program. You can call it something else if you like. And in this case, we want to bring in a file. So we'll have to go out to a browser. Let's go to the PDB, the Protein Data Bank, rcsb.org, and we'll look for a sequence. In this case, I've chosen lactate dehydrogenase from human muscle, and we'll download the FASTA sequence. So it's downloaded. We say fine. Notice that I put it in the right place. Python scripts for me. And you'll see that it appears there in our file structure window. And I can open it directly from there. I just want to point out that there are a bunch of things that we don't want. There's header sequence there. That's the PDB ID number. There's a bunch of other chains, so essentially duplicate sequences, because lactate dehydrogenase is a complex of several different polypeptide chains. I just want to delete all of that stuff. Header file, header information, and extra sequences. And then we clean up. We don't have any extra files, and we can save any extra content in that text file, and then we'll save that, and it's still down there in our list of files in our file structure. So now we're going to say file. In this case, file is a module of actions. So file is going to be something that calls open, and then open is a built-in function that opens a file inside quotes. So we give it quote file name, close quote, comma, quote R. R tells open to read that file. Now here's our variable, sequence. So sequence is a variable built from file, and in this case file is being read. So there's another built-in function, file.read, reads whatever is in that file. And then we close. Python always requires us to close our module. So file the module is getting closed with those open parentheses. And now we can go back and print whatever that module carried out for us. Print sequence. In this case, we called the contents of file sequence. Let's run it. There it is. So the module, opened the sequence file and then printed out that sequence. Now big whoop, we already had the file printed out. What do we want to do? Let's initiate a for loop that will create a new variable, AA, amino acids. So we initiated a for loop and we defined a variable, and we're going to iterate through a string of text. So AA is a variable that includes this list of 20 capitalized letters. You'll notice that the capitalized letters are what appear in our sequence file. These happen to be the amino acids, representing the single letter codes for the amino acids. So alanine, cysteine, aspartic acid, glutamic acid, phenylalanine, glycine, histidine, isoleucine, lysine, leucine, methionine, asparagine, OP, proline, Q, glutamine, arginine. You guys know these. Serine, threonine, TUV, valine, W, tryptophan, X, there's no X, Y, tyrosine, there's no Z. Close quotes, that's the string of text that constitutes AA. It's a for loop, so we want to end that line with a colon. All right, now you see that colon indents the next line, so that's whatever is inside our loop. Now we have a new variable called number. And number calls on sequence. But by giving sequence dot count, we're calling on yet another function called count. So the new variable invokes count, which counts the number of instances of AA in our sequence file. So we're getting a little complicated because we have AA, which is 20 characters, but we want to use AA to access and interrogate our sequence file. So now we want to just print the number of instances that AA appeared in our sequence. So AA tells us what letter of the 20 to use, comma, number tells us the number of instances that that letter appears in the variable sequence. And now let's run it. And there it is. We see, oh yes, we can resize the different windows as needed. So we can resize our shell, and we can see that, yes, it printed the sequence out again, but it also printed the 20 amino acids and the number of each of those letters, the number of instances of each of those letters in the variable sequence. So that's great. We made it a table telling us that in lactate dehydrogenase muscle from human, there are 11 prolines, etc. Now, let's create a new statement. It's a with statement, and it's going to create a module F. F is going to be how we access and modify a new file that now, so with we've called open, and we create a new file, output.txt, comma A. A tells us that we can append to that file. We don't want to rewrite it, right? We want to go through the for loop and then write to that file the amino acid type, the number of instances, and we want to make sure that it writes that to the file defined in our module F. And then, of course, we always have to close our module after we begin it. So F has to also be closed. So we open. In open, we created a file that we want to append to. That whole process, opening the file, is called F, the module F. And what the module F does is print whatever's happening. Remember, we're inside of a for loop already, so we're doing this every time the for loop goes. So we print whatever AA is for the current iteration, and then go back and do it again. Let's run it. It's going to give us the same sequence output. Yes, there it is. But also you see now output.txt appears. We can open that, and we see that we've created that list. Always nice to be able to save your output somewhere, and now you know how to do it.